and welcome back to Storybaggers. Today we'll be reading Chapter 6. On with the story. Bobble and Vesper hung about for a bit, watching the girl in the pretty dress as she spun the wool. It was a bit boring. Spin, 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 twirl, twirl, twirl. The length of wool getting longer and longer as it wound itself around the dancing bobbing. Vesper yawned. His tummy was rumbly, and his thoughts had started to wander to where the next snack was coming from. Bobble was puzzling over what he had seen. He had watched the story go into the farmhouse, and knew it was trying to play itself out. But still, he couldn't see why the vampire bat should be taking such a keen interest in it. It was then that he spotted Boo knuckling his way quietly along the wall towards the girl, drawing out what looked like a shadow from his waistcoat pocket as he went. If Bobble's super senses had been speaking to him before, they were shrieking now. The girl was going to be bitten by the nightcrawler. Something must be done. It was up to Bobble to swoop to the rescue and save her. Without a second thought, or actually any thought at all, Bobble swung himself through the open window, struck his super shiny wings together, with a sound he thought not unlike a tiny clap of thunder, and rocketed towards the girl. Aurora sensed a movement of air rather than saw the small black missile as it launched itself towards her. She uttered a loud shriek, shot to her feet, kicking the chair backwards in the process, and knocked the spinning wheel over with a rather magnificent crash. Frozen to the wall in fright, one foot poised in the air in the manner of a cartoon cat burglar caught in a police searchlight, Boo was close enough to appreciate every detail as the flying spindle arced over Aurora's outstretched arm, then turned and fell, point downwards, to stick itself into her big toe. "Flippin' heck," was all the poor girl had time to utter, before she fell into a deep and dreamless sleep. Flippin' heck was not quite the phrase that flashed through Boo's brain. He turned on Bobble, claws raised in frustration. "What in Haven's name did you do that for?" Pulling himself together after the shock of having rendered unconscious the girl he was intending to rescue, Bobble drew himself up to his full height of 12 centimetres. He swished his shiny wings like an indignant pantomime prince, and pointed an accusing claw at the vampire. "You were going to bite her, weren't you?" "No, I wasn't." "Were too." "Wasn't?" Boo stuck out his lower jaw a little at this point, and Bobble was treated to a good view of the points on the ends of those tiny white teeth. His gaze was only drawn away when he spotted the black netting bag dangling from Boo's right claw. "What's that?" The vampire bat had the grace to look slightly shifty. "It's my bag." "What's it for?" "For catching stories, obviously." Boo rolled his eyes skywards. Bobble goggled, unable to believe what he had just heard. His voice rose a semitone. "Catching stories? Why?" "To kill them, stupid." If Boo had told Bobble that the bag was for carrying around live baby mice to snack on, he could not have been more horrified. Boo looked him straight in the eye. "It's what we do. Vampire bats? We're storybaggers. I thought everyone knew that. We kill the stories, take their happy endings, and hang them up in darkness, so they'll never see the light of day." Bobble had never heard anything so wicked in his whole life. Dr. Kamuri hadn't told the class this little bombshell. Sure, stories could be a bit tricksy at times, but generally they were harmless enough. And they were important. Everyone in Haven knew that. Stories had to be free, had to play themselves out. If stories died in Haven, then they could never, ever return to the Red World. And if they couldn't return to the Red World, then no more happy ever afters. Ever. Bobble reeled as he tried to imagine a world without stories. Then he gave up. No, he couldn't. Such a thing was unimaginable.
Bobble? Bobble? Something's happening. I think you should have a look at this."
Vesper's voice brought Bobble bumping back into the moment. He sounded frantic. Leaving Boo on the floor of the bedroom, Bobble wobbled up to the windowsill and looked out. "What? I can't see anything. It's just green. I can't see anything past all these leaves."
"Exactly. It's the garden. Don't you think it's going awfully fast? Sort of climbing up the house?"
Boo's voice carried up to them. "It's the story, bat brains. Remember how it goes? Forest of thorns, or in this case, nettles and dandelions, hiding the house for 100 years until the sleeping beauty gets awakened by—" He stopped, suddenly aware of activity outside the farmhouse. 2 men were talking. "Well, it beats me. It didn't look anything like that when I went out this morning. I gave it a good strim at the weekend. Now look at it. Weeds all over the place. There's story mischief behind this, if I'm not mistaken. A younger voice chipped in. Look, there's a window open at the top. Get the ladder and I'll shimmy on up and see what's what. Bobble flashed a relieved grin at Vesper. It's the story unfolding. It's fighting back. It's all happening like it should. Just you wait and see. Boo can't stop it this time. Vesper nodded, but his mind was not really on stories at the moment. It was on his tummy, and the fact that he had not filled it in what felt like a horribly long time. It gave a long, loud rumble, and he looked around. Surely there was something around here that he could eat. By the sounds of something scraping on the wall outside, Boo could tell that the ladder had been placed up against the wall, and guessed that Philip was on his way up to the window. He had to think, and fast. What came next? The kiss! That was it! If Boo could stop Philip from planting a kiss on the Sleeping Beauty, the story would be trapped, and he could bag it and scarp her. He reckoned that he could outfly the Fruit Fuzzies in a straight race to the heights any night of the week. Fairly skipping in delight at his own cleverness, the little vampire scuttled across the floor to the sleeping girl, scrambled onto her wrist, scampered up her arm, across her shoulder, then threw himself, wings outstretched, across her upper lip. It looked for all the world as if Aurora had sprouted a glossy black moustache. No one, Boo thought with satisfaction, would kiss that face without giving it at least a second glance, and that would give him all the time he needed. The young man put a long leg over the windowsill. He gazed around the room and spotted Aurora lying on the floor. In 2 strides he had crossed the room and was just bending down when Vesper spotted the fruit bowl. It lay on a small wooden table at the other side of the fireplace. Philip was between Vesper and his snack. Too late, a panicking Bobble snatched at empty air in the space where his friend had been, as Vesper launched himself like a missile at the waiting bowl. Everything happened at once. Boo was watching smugly from under half-closed eyelashes as Philip stepped back in surprise upon seeing Aurora's bushy moustache. Vesper bounced with a loud plock off the apple that turned out, in fact, to be decoration, being made of solid wood, and fell back against the knees of the now staggering Philip, sending him tipping forwards onto the girl. It was magnificent. The smack could be heard around the room as Philip planted his face on both Aurora and Boo. "Oh, get off, get off!" An appalled Boo flapped off the girl's face just as her, very blue, eyes started to open into the eyes of the young man who had just kissed her. The story was safe. Boo, spitting with fury, watched as the telltale sparkle of a happy ending flitted through the open window. He wailed in frustration, shook his claw at Vesper, then flapped off into the night, his little netting bag trailing, empty, by his side. A few minutes later, Bobble and Vesper were hanging out under the branch of an overloaded plum tree at the bottom of the girls' garden, digesting. Vesper sighed deeply. I needed that. Actually, what he said was,
I need with that.
Stuffed as his mouth was with the juicy fruit. He pursed his lips and spat a plum stone down onto the grass below, where it joined a large pile of other soggy stones. Bobble had finished his plum and was rocking himself to and fro, reflecting on events in the farmhouse. Aurora had recovered quickly and was, even now, accepting compliments from the young man on how beautiful she looked in the new dress. The cake was being cut. This particular happy ending looked safe from where he hung. But what about the others? Now that Bobble knew what Boo was up to, he knew he was going to have to stop him, to save them all. End of story. In a manner of speaking. It was what great Uncle Bendigo would do. Bobble had made up his small fuzzy mind, and once it was set, he wouldn't be budged, by anything. Not even his mum. Probably. He breathed deeply, pulled his shoulders back, and puffed out his chest to the point where he almost filled his waistcoat. Vesper, old friend, we are going to have to shadow that bat. Vesper spat out another stone.
I knew you were going to say that. Why does it have to be us? Why can't we tell one of the older ones and let them do it?
Because, my buddy, my chummaroo, we can do it ourselves. We're the ones who found out what Boo and his mates are up to, and it's up to us to stop them. You and me, real-life superbats, not just in games. Sound good?
Sounds like a gold-edged invitation to the last dance of the Disco of Doom.
Good. I knew I could count on you. Bobble looked up at the stars. They winked naughtily back at him. We'll start tomorrow at first dark. In tomorrow's story, baggers, Vesper has some trouble with beans. Till then, stay safe everyone, stay inside, and good night.